Hello guys, and welcome back to Joe's Ventures. And today we're doing another episode of our Planet Zoo mod spotlights. We take a look at some of the wonderful mods people have been making and use them to talk about some of the wonderful biodiversity that we share, or in this case, a lot of animals today shared a world with. So today we've got quite an interesting assortment. We've got a bird, reptile, a few extinct animals, because one of them's the animals is not an extinct mammal, but yeah, whatever. They're all going to be very interesting assortment animals today, which I'm quite excited about. So we're going to be first starting off with Lorby, who making another return. We've got a few modders coming back on the scene slowly. We've got Lorby, who made the hooded Merganser. So let's have a look at these guys. So let's have a look at the camera. I don't know what puts there. That's the female. Look at the male. As you know, the males are always a little bit more dazzling than birds for the most part. So here is the hooded Merganser, or Lophidices culatus. So these guys are a species of fish-eating duck in the subfamily Annatalidae, and the only extant member of the genus. There is actually an extinct fossil member of this species of this genus that lived in the late Pleistocene of Florida, which is Florensis, but we don't know its exact relationships to the modern bird. But the Greek genus name comes from the Greek language Olophus, which means crest, and Dices, which means diver, so basically the crest diver is where its kind of name comes from. And the specific name, Coculatus, means hooded, so it's basically the hooded crest diver. This is the best way to put it, with the crest diver hooded. That's probably not makes the best sense, but we'll go with it. So these guys, as you can mention before, are a sexually dimorphic species. So you can see the male is kind of very interesting. We'll look at the female first, just because it's what's described here. So you can see the female is greyish brown with a narrow white patch on her lower breast and belly. She also has a light reddish brown crest extending from the back of her head. So you can see that reddish brown crest going on there. Probably gets a little bit of a look in there. And during the non-breeding season, the male looks pretty similar to the female, except for that her eyes are yellow, his eyes are yellow, and the female's eyes are brown. So that's basically what they look like non-breeding plumage. This is the males in their breeding plumage. It looks quite interesting. In breeding plumage, you can see the dorsal areas of the head, neck, and breast, and mature males are marked with white markings, and these large white patches on either side of the crest. And they're particularly conspicuous when they raise his head during courtship. You notice also his flanks, lower flanks are a rich reddish brown or chestnut in colour, and the breast and underside you can see are quite white. And they extend into white stripes around the crop and breast. And in both sexes, there's a narrow white stripe across the terminal wing feathers, and this bird is in repose with the appearance of longitudinal white stripes down the bird's lower back, as you can see going on there. And young birds they can be visible. First winter birds differ from adult females as they have a grey-brown neck and underparts. So it's a little bit, you can tell, like a first year, and then they kind of, all ages, they're going to be more dark and things like that. So in terms of their measurements, they get to about 15 to 19 inches in length, they're about 40 to 49 centimetres, 16 to 31 ounces, or about 400 to 53 to 879 grams, so about 800-900 grams, and have a wingspan of about 60 to 66 centimeters, or about 23 to 26 inches. So in terms of the habitat, they are short distant migrants. So they winter in the United States in the region where winter allows for ice-free conditions in lakes and rivers. They have two major year-round ranges. One is in the eastern US from the southern Canadian-US border along the Atlantic coast to the Gulf Coast and the regions of the Mississippi Delta. And the smaller year-round range extends from Washington State to southern British Columbia and northern Idaho. And they breed in some extent to Missouri and southern Canada, and from Nova Scotia to eastern North Dakota to Saskatchewan, migrating when necessary to avoid these kind of conditions. And from 1966 to 2015, the hooded Merganser has actually encountered a 1.5% increase in its population throughout its breeding range, which is actually quite good, so they are considered least concern. For preferences in terms of their habitat, the hooded Merganser lives on small bodies of water such as ponds and small estuaries where there's ample emergent aquatic vegetation, but also will inhabit larger wetlands, impoundments, flooded timbers, and rivers, and they prefer fresh water but will occur in brackish water. They're also quite a common species in captivity in Europe, and most specimens recorded in the wild are either escapees or feral animals, with a small number of them being regarded as wild vagrants. And Britain's currently first accepted record of the bird was in 2000, and small numbers have appeared to be seen regularly in Dublin, which I believe to be actually a feral population that could have escaped from people keeping them as pets. So we'll have a look at the female, because we already had good look at the male. So, although the hooded Merganser is I already read that. The hooded Merganser is a diving predator, and they typically hunt by sight underwater. Most studies show that its diet varies depending on circumstance, but it usually is dominated by fish, as I mentioned, it's a fish-hunting duck. In addition, it will eat aquatic insects and aquatic invertebrates such as crabs and crayfish. So, looking at its breeding, we'll have a look at the cute little babies. We always know we love a cute little baby. So, breeding, male and females will form monogamous pairs and remain together until the female has selected a nesting cavity and completed laying her clutch. After that, the male will leave, and then the female incubates and cares for the brood. Females will actively seek out cavities in dead trees or artificial nest boxes, such as those provided for nesting wood ducks. And they prefer cavities 4 to 15 feet off the ground, and breeding occurs anytime between the end of February and the end of June, depending on the region. And they will lay a clutch of about 7 to 15 eggs, but only will begin incubation when the last egg is laid, thereby permitting synchronous hatching. All hatchings are consequently above the same size, which facilitates effective parental care. During incubation, the female may lose about 8 to 16% of her body weight. Like most species of waterfowl, baby hooded Mergansers are precocial, which pretty much means they're ready to go right out of the egg, and they usually leave the nest within 24 hours after they hatch, and this is about long enough to accommodate the synchronous hatching. And once they leave the nest, the young are capable of diving and foraging, but remain with their mother for warmth and protection. So there has been some population declines in the past that have been linked with large-scale deforestation, and because they're cavity nested, they require mature trees and then they have suitable nest sites. And this has been suggested at recent years. Proper timber management has been actually increasing the sustainability, increasing available habitat for them. And one priority as well is maintaining wooded habitat for cavity nesting ducks, is to maintain a sufficient population or mature trees in which suitable nesting cavities would be beneficial. In addition, they do make use of these artificial nest boxes that have been used when available, so it is something that can be done in areas maybe that there's not a lot of old trees anymore. You can supplement that with artificial nest box, and that helps the population fine. Because of their high reliance on aquatic prey, though, they are very susceptible to harm by many types of pollution, some of which are poisons that accumulate in their prey. Direct poisoning the predators higher up in the food chain, which would be the Merganser, and some of which just reduce the population of prey, so there'd be less food to go around for all the Mergansers. But yeah, really, really cool. I love seeing this species, another really cool bird. Do love talking about them. So this one was done by Lorby. Next up, we've got one done by Narwhal. Very interesting animal here. We've got the Manuru or sea Gharial. So this is another really interesting one. Let's see if you can find the male. There he is. He looks hungry. But this is the sea Gharial. So I'm kind of gonna talk about another species and this one, just because it provides a little bit more context. But yeah, it's a little bit confusing. So the genus that this species belongs to, there is two species. There is the genus is Incarnogravilis. So they're a species of gharialoid crocodiles. So related to the modern gharial and Sunda gharial, false gharial as you may know, Tommy Stomer. Fossils of one species, the type species Gamorai, has been found in the Urumucu Formation in Venezuela and in Brazil as well, where it's found to be late Miocene. The strata, as I mentioned, rather than late Miocene, and thought to be Pliocene. So the type species would have lived in Venezuela and those areas, and lived in like a coastal paleo environment along with other graveloid species such as Gharial, and would have lived with all sorts of different species of graveloids like Pisco-gavalis living in coastal environments, and then interesting as well. And they also would have lived with other giant species of crocodilians such as Perusuchus, which is quite interesting. And actually, which is quite interesting, we think of this sea gharial as being like weird, but looking at how the patterns of how the gharials spread across the world, we actually think that most of them would have been ancestrally seafaring and then evolved to become freshwater, since both modern species of gharial, like the false gharial and the Indian gharial, they are both freshwater species. But what's really interesting as well, this genus may have survived right up into the Holocene, so basically up to about a few thousand years ago. So there's a Pleistocene graveloid found from Woodlark Island in Papua New Guinea, which was originally named Gavalis papuensis, but was also identified to be a member of this genus, which is a little bit shaky because the fossils are not really well preserved. It is probably most likely more closely related to the modern gharials like Tomistoma and things like that, but for whatever reason, the cladistic analyses suggested this was a member of this genus, even though it lived on another part of the world, since Gamorai lived in the Miocene of South America, while this guy lived in the Holocene and Pleistocene of Papua New Guinea. So it's very weird to have two members of this genus so far apart from each other. But yeah, it could be due to the resolution of the fossils. The fossils didn't seem to be quite particularly well preserved, but we'll get into that. But this papuensis, this species, was found to be strictly marine, since it was found in association with sea turtles and sirenians, so things like probably dugongs, especially around that area, and represents the youngest fully marine crocodile to date. So we think as marine crocodiles are kind of weird, like the only one that's kind of approaching that is a saltwater crocodile. But back in prehistory, around the Miocene and Pliocene, we did have marine crocodiles a lot, like Pisco-gavalis, as I mentioned, that lived with things like Megalodon and Leviathan and all those really weird South American beasties. And then we actually just had recently pretty much a sea gharial until, potentially the Holocene or early Pleistocene. So we've narrowly just missed out on a completely marine crocodile, which is quite interesting. So there's been looking at different phylogenies of this animal. The phylogenetic analysis actually found the group Cryptosuchinae had this genus in it and is thought to be closely related and in between kind of the groups. And then another 2018 study actually found that the group Cryptosuchus may have actually been paraphyletic and is thought to actually be an evolutionary grade between Tomistoma or the false gharial, as I mentioned, false gharial, Tomistoma, and then the gharial from India. So it's actually thought that these guys are kind of the two extremes, and all those extinct species kind of fit within that group in the Cryptosuchinae, and Echinogabalis is actually found within that group. But I actually suspect, and I think Noah Waller actually put this as well, it's probably much more closely related to the false gharial Tomistoma, just because of its proximity, and also the poor quality of its preserved material makes it hard to determine. So we really don't know. Maybe, hopefully, more fossils could, prove the point, and maybe potentially even, finding more fossils and things like that would be quite cool. But yeah, it is cool to have a species that is kind of really not mentioned much around. And cool to see that it was marine crocodiles up right until recently, because we think of that as weird, but there was a lot of gharial species that were coastal or even, seafaring. And during prehistory, there was a lot of seagoing crocodilians, which is really cool. You can see that's the male there. And being an island species, this is quite small. They only get to about 2 meters long. But you can see this cute little baby here. How adorable is this guy? I really do love these and Noah always just kills it with these prehistoric mods as well. Always killing it. So you can find the female. I think she's swimming over there. There she is. So yeah, we'll have a look at the Zoopedia as well to get more information. See, look, the genus name is kind of... it was fully marine species that lived fed on small fish, about 2 meters long. Its taxonomy is disputed, as I mentioned. So Even though it is put into a kind of Gravalis, it's likely not that member. It's because the fossils are so bad, we really just don't know. It's kind of one of them things. So let's have a look. So this is where it was found, around Papua New Guinea. That's the size, we don't know about that. Muyua was the youngest fully marine crocodile to date. We already kind of mentioned that it might have been more related to other old world crocodiles like Tomistoma. Yeah, we found that. It had salt glands, and even though it's believed it could have been extinction may have been linked to humans, there is no direct evidence. So yeah, cool species, another cool one to talk about. So that's done by NicholasLionRider, who always does a wonderful job. Next up, we've got a subspecies of reindeer, a really cute one as well, which I'm excited to get into. So we have got by Nuto, we have got the Peary caribou. So let's have a look at the Peary caribou. So the Peary caribou, scientific name Merganser Antarcticus peary. These guys are subspecies of caribou that are found in the high Arctic and Nunavut in the northwestern territories of Canada. They are the smallest of all the North American caribou, with females weighing on average about 60 kilograms or 130 pounds, and males weighing about 110 kilograms to 140 pounds. And their average length for a female is 1.4 meters or 4'7", and a male is 5'7" or 1.7 meters, which is quite interesting. So, like other caribou, both males and females have antlers. So you can see the males here, and then the females have much smaller antlers. The males grow their antlers from March to August, and the females from June to September. In both cases, velvet is gone by October. The coat of the caribou is white and thick in winter, though in summer it can be short and darker, almost slack grey, and the coat is made up of hollow hairs to help insulate heat. So the males become sexually mature after 2 years and the female 3. Breeding is in the fall, and it depends on the female having built up sufficient fat reserves. And gestation lasts for about 7 to 8 months, and one calf is born. So we'll have a look at the cute little calf over here. So that's the cute little guy. Oh, no, that's not what we wanted. Of course, it overshot it a bit. So you can see they're so small, that's almost like it's moonwalking, but that's still real, real cute. That's so adorable. Anyway, we'll have a look at the female now. So you can see the female's got much smaller antlers, but still has antlers regardless. Peary caribou feed mostly on grasses, like things like sedges, lichens, and mushrooms. They seem to enjoy the purple saxifrage in the summer. Their muzzles become purple because of these plants. The hooves are also sharp like a shovel, and they can use them to dig into snow to search for food. These caribou rarely travel more than 150 kilometers from their winter feeding grounds to summer ones. They are able to outrun Arctic wolves, their main predator, and are quite good swimmers, and usually travel in small groups no more than 12 in the summer and 4 in the winter. The Peary caribou its population has dropped from about 40,000 in 1961 to 13,000 in 2016, according to the Committee of the Status of Endangered Wildlife in Canada. And during this period, the number of days which above freezing temperatures has increased significantly, resulting in ice layers in the snowpack. These ice layers hinder foraging, and those likely actually will contribute to dramatic drops in caribou population in the future because of things like climate change. And the Peary caribou, named the Tukulu in the Inuit language, is the main source of food for Inuit, and they were also named after the American explorer Robert Peary. So, as I mentioned, in terms of their plout, during the winter they becomes thicker and wider, and summer it's still darker. Their pelt is actually considered to be quite similar to those of things like the barren ground caribou or the dolphin union caribou herd, though it's slightly darker in the dolphin union caribou herd. Antlers, you can see how both light slant grey antler velvet and the Borneo woodland caribou and the barren ground caribou both have kind of dark chocolate brown. So that kind of sets it apart a little bit as well. It's a little bit more like a light grey rather than a chocolate brown, which is quite fun. We'll have a look at the male again. Where has he gone? There he is. Ooh. And this is a great example, as I always say, about like dwarfism. So you can see these guys probably got smaller due to being isolated on islands. So as I mentioned, they do not have those fixed migrations. They occur in high Arctic islands such as Banks Island, Victoria Island, Prince of Wales Island, Summerit Islands, and the Queen Elizabeth Islands. In summer, they search for richest vegetation found in the upper slopes of rivers and valleys, and in the winter, they find areas that are not too deep, such as rugged uplands, beach ridges, and rocky outcrops. And the Alavaraka National Park has a range for these caribou. And actually have found the bones of these guys from the late glacial maximum to early Holocene. And there was another small species of caribou that became extinct around 1900 that believed to live around there as well, and thought they'd be the same. Which is interesting. And some genetics looking to them did find they doubted the validity of that kind of extinct subspecies, and then thought just to be members of the Peary caribou. And in terms of conservation, they are threatened as of April 1979, and they are considered threatened even now. They are kind of considered quite threatened. The current population is about 13,000, and it's thought the population was about 5,400 individuals in 1996, but it is luckily showing an increasing trend. So luckily, even though they are still quite endangered, there is an increasing trend, so they're doing okay-ish. And this is likely because of climate change is a big issue for this particular subspecies because, as I mentioned, it's getting harder to forage with the ice. But in terms of their taxonomy, they actually were considered another species, Ragnifer Peary, but then it was made a subspecies of the barren ground caribou in 1960, of Arctus Peary. And then once they were all made conspecific, or all the same species, just reindeer instead of caribou and reindeer being different species. So they've all been kind of lumped, and these populations have become their own subspecies. But yeah, really, really cool. Definitely a big fan of this guy. Always a big fan of a good caribou. So that was done by Nuto, another modder that hasn't been around for a while. So nice to see them coming back. So next up, we've got another modder that's couple modders, NicholasLionRider and Leaf, the dream team. Getting us some really cool extinct species. So today we're going to the Pleistocene of North America, and we've got the Hagerman's horse, which is not actually named properly, it's just got species base. So if you're looking for it in the Wikipedia, just remember the mod hasn't got the names and everything yet. So the Hagerman horse, also known as the American zebra, is an extinct species of equid native to North America during the Pliocene and early Pleistocene. It is one of the oldest and most primitive members of the genus Equus, and is a state fossil of Idaho. So it was first discovered by Elmer Cook, who was a cattle rancher, and he discovered some fossil bones in this land of Hagerman, Idaho, and then showed them to Dr. H.T. Stearns in the U.S. Geological Society, who identified the bones of extinct horse. And then the areas where they were found, the Hagerman Horse Quarry was excavated and 3 tons of specimens were found. The excavations continued up until the early 1930s, and the Hagerman Horse Quarry floor grew to 5,000 square meters, or 460 square meters, and a back wall of 5 feet or 40 meters high. Ultimately, 5 nearly complete skeletons were found, more than 100 skulls and 48-hour lower jaws were found, and it was actually believed this was a large amount of fossils because they were in a watering hole at one point, and it could have been accumulating, injured individuals or things that older injured animals and all that could have died there, which is quite interesting. And they even suggested, because there was lots of newborns to adults, there was like a normal herd. The herd actually may have died in a single catastrophic event, potentially like trying to cross a river, or potentially a flood or something. So that could have been something that happened. So the Hagerman's horse was given the scientific name initially of Plesiohippus shoshonensis in 1930 by Smithsonian paleontologist James W. Gildy, who led the excavations. However, further studies showed that actually it resembled a species of primitive horse in Texas named Equus simplidens, named by Edward Drinker Cope in 1892, and because of this, the 2 forms were interpreted to be the same species, and the name Equus simplidens was older, so that took priority, so now they became genus Equus. And the genus placement of the species is controversial, with some choosing to place it in Plesiohippus instead. And the 2019 analysis actually suggests to be more closely related to the living Equus than Hippodon or also Dinohippus, but outside the group containing all living equids. So it is considered quite basal. So the evolution of the species, the earliest remains were found in the Pliocene, about 4.1 to 3.2 million years ago, and it's actually suggested to be the ancestor of the Eurasian sterine kind of equines such as Equus cinereus, which had first arrived in Eurasia at the beginning of the Pleistocene, about 2.6 million years ago, and it was proposed to be the ancestor of the living zebras and asses. And the youngest fossils of the Equus simplidens date to about, 250,000 years ago, which is the youngest. But they obviously probably lived a little longer since then. The body mass of an adult Equisemplidens individual was thought to be pretty much, we'll have a look at the other one, was pretty much suggested to be about 300 to 400 kilograms, or 660 to 880 pounds, similar to that of a zebra. And its overall form and skull is more comparable to those of zebra, though their dental morphology is more primitive. The vomer bone is actually noticeably elongate as well, which is quite interesting. So basically that's kind of where they get the name the American zebra. Remains of this species have been found across western and central North America. So they've been found in Idaho, Arizona, California, Texas, Nebraska, Kansas, southwest to Mexico. And looking at its ecology, we do know a little bit of the ecology of this guy. They are thought to have had a highly abrasive, almost exclusively grazing diet, based on looking at the wear patterns on their teeth, very similar to modern equines, and particularly zebras, so hence also correlating with the American zebra. So ecologically very similar to a zebra, basically the American zebra, as you mentioned before. And the species is seen to have a herding structure quite similar to those of modern horses, perhaps led by a dominant harem stallion, similar to living horses, potentially, something like a gravy zebra, where males maintain a territory, something like that. Both are equally possible, I guess, but we'll have a look at these cute little babies. I love seeing them sleep like that. It's really, really cute. Really cool species to talk about. Definitely a big fan. So yeah, next up, we have got Great Cakes mod taking over the rest of the mod spotlights. This is done by Leaf and NicholasLionRider. Really, really cool. I do actually quite like the skin, because I think the kind of weird white spots around the eyes is a little weird, but that's all pretty good skins. Anyway, we're going to carry on with Great Cakes mod's Pacific Marten. So I think one of the first mods they made was the American Marten, so it's cool that we're getting the Pacific Marten. So another really cool species that we get to talk about. So the Pacific Marten, or Martens canuria, these guys are a species of North American mammal from the family Mustelidae, so they are related to martens and weasels and wolverines, and it's found throughout Western North America. So they were thought to formerly be the same species as the American Marten, or Martens americana, but several studies using molecular genetics has indicated it's actually a distinct species, and it has been recognized as such. And the two species do have some morphological differences, or some physical differences, with the Pacific Marten having a shorter rostrum and broader cranial shape, and the two species are thought to have diverged during the last glacial maximum and since being isolated from each other in glacial refugia. So they would have been isolated and they couldn't interbreed, and that allowed them to diverge and become different species. And there have been several subspecies described, and most of them aren't really are only separable based on, not really separable, have been found based on fossil history, cranial analysis, and mitochondrial DNA studies, but none of these subspecies have been used taxonomy, and subspecies technology is usually ignored except in regards to conservation, things like that, and is sadly also considered a vulnerable species. So, its distribution, it has a very wide but fragmented distribution throughout Western North America. It is distributed this way is thought to be a consequence of the pattern of which it had colonized new areas of the ice sheets retreated, and its range extends from Alexander and the Hagerman archipelagos of the Pacific Northwest coast around Humboldt County in California and the east of the Southern Rocky Mountains, as far south as New Mexico. And there is luckily, there's also a broad hybrid zone between the Pacific and American martens, known to exist in the Columbia Mountains, and also in some islands of Alaska. The species is also known to inhabit deciduous forests in areas such as the Pacific Northwest in the United States, and through the Rocky Mountains and Sierra Nevada. In Oregon, Pacific martens occur to be higher temperature terrain due to their ability to survive larger snow levels. And they are separated in two habitats, the coastal mountains, where they occur at lower elevations, and the Cascade Mountains, but are mostly more mountain than pine forest, separated by more unsuitable habitat by lowland and valleys. So male and females of Pacific martens living in northwestern California, they tend to have the approximately equal home range sizes, and in northeastern California, movements will be influenced by cover, topography, and other Pacific martens, so there can be a lot of, here and there, things like that. In northwestern Montana, though, there actually appears to coincide with the edges of large meadows or burnt areas, suggesting that these open areas represent physiological rather than, or psychological rather than physical barriers, which is quite interesting. So in terms of their behaviour, in northeastern California, most of the time was spent travelling and hunting in the summer than in winter, suggesting that reduced winter activity may be related to thermal and food stresses, or may be the result of larger prey consumption and consequent decrease in time spent foraging. As in northeastern California, activity in the snow-free season of May to December was diurnal, but in winter they are more nocturnal. And year-round movements of the Grand Teton Mountain National Park was ranged from 0 to 2.83 miles, so basically from 0 to 4.5 kilometers, which averaged about 0.6 miles, or just under a kilometer. They observed 88 individuals. So in southwestern Wyoming, temperatures seem to affect a lot of their resting nest sites and things like that. Above snow sites was used during warmer weather, while kind of ones underground were used during the coldest weather, which is quite cool. They do have lots of interesting adaptations to deal with that cold weather and deep snow, as they're sympathetic with the fisher, which competes with prey with the Pacific marten. And they tend to be more associated with deep snow, while fishes are more associated with shallow snow. So it's a little bit of niche partitioning to try and avoid, too much, overlap, which is quite interesting. But in terms of reproduction, so let's have a look at the cute little babies. Where's the cute little baby? It's got to be, there it is. Look at that cute little baby. Cute little baby marten. So, in terms of reproduction, observations in Oregon suggest that juveniles may disperse in early spring. Of 9 juvenile Pacific martens that dispersed, they moved about 20 miles or 33 kilometers and established home range outside the study area. 3 were killed dispersing between 5 to 14 miles or 8 to 23 kilometers and things like that. Spring dispersal ends between June and early August, after which individuals will remain in the same area and establish a home range. So in terms of their food habits, these guys are omnivores, with rodents and rabbits being common prey. Birds were most important prey in terms of frequency and volume in places like British Columbia. Fish may be also important in coastal areas, and diet is less diverse within the Pacific marten range than with the American marten, although there is less diversity in the Pacific states. So they just might be eating less because there is less to eat, kind of thing. In terms of mortality, Pacific martens are vulnerable to predation from many species, such as raptors, like birds of prey. They have been killed by bobcats, coyotes, raptors, other martens, great horned owls, bald eagles, golden eagles, lynxes, Canadian lynxes, mountain lions, fishes, wolverines, grizzly bears, American black bears, and grey wolves. So that seems to be a big thing of mortality for them. And due to its fragmented habitat, it's actually another big issue for their conservation. So their habitat is a little bit more fragmented than that of the American marten, and that means they're more vulnerable to inbreeding and the island effect. And given their status, due to their status as commercially valuable fur bearers, they were frequently being translocated throughout North America, and no thought was given whether martens were originally native to the area or translocated there, which can be led to hybridization, gene swamping, and outbreeding depression. And on Dall Island, American martens have been introduced and have been hybridizing with the native Pacific marten population, which may be put at risk. And on many islands, the American marten has been introduced, and they may be hybridizing and, taking over the habitat of the Pacific martens, which is interesting. Though in the Alexander Archipelago, there seem to be introduced and are present, but there's no signs of Pacific martens, but we don't know if the Pacific marten was already there, or it may just have been no martens there, but it may have been originally there and then outcompeted by the American martens, but we really don't know. But the species is also some places like the Olympic Peninsula in Washington State. They seem to be quite low populations that are at risk because of climate change and small population sizes and habitat modifications that could be hurting it. So yeah, they are a little bit more endangered than the American marten, but overall there seem to be quite a few of them around. They are considered apparently secure. So a little bit less than, I don't think they actually have an official kind of ICUCN rating yet, but they seem to be doing, for the most part, pretty okay. But those issues do plague them. But yeah, That is Great Cakes Mods, who's also going to be making the next couple mods as well. The Pacific Marten, now we've got the crab-eating mongoose. So a really cool species here. So that's the crab-eating mongoose, a really, really cool one. So the crab-eating mongoose, or ova. These guys are species of mongoose that are found throughout the northeastern Indian subcontinent, to Southeast Asia, to southern China and Taiwan, and are doing quite well. They are considered least concerned with the IUCN. So the original name was Gulo ova, which was, as I mentioned, was part of Gulo. That's the same genus as Wolverine. And it was introduced by Brian Hogtown Hodson in 1836. But then it was later classified as the genus Herpteses, which is the same one as all Asian mongooses, but they're now thought to belong to the genus Ova, so they're their own genus now. So in terms of the characteristics, the crab-eating mongoose, as you can see, is grey on its sides and dusky brown on its neck, chest, belly, and limbs. It has a broad white stripe along the side of its neck, extending from the cheek to the shoulder, and has white specks on the top of its head. Its chin is white and its throat is grey. Its iris is yellow, so you can see its eyes are yellow, which is quite interesting. Its ears are short and rounded and has actually webs between its digits. And the head to body length ranges from about 47 to 55 centimeters, or about 18 to 20 inches, with a 28 to 34 or 11 to 13 inch long bushy tail. And they range from between 1.1 to 2.5 kilograms, or about 2.4 to 5 pounds. So they're having a little play there. So the crab-eating macaque occurs, not macaque, I keep saying macaque, but mongoose, occurs in northeastern India, northern Myanmar, Thailand, Malaysia, Laos, Cambodia, and Vietnam. And it's rare in Bangladesh and has been recorded in altitudes of about sea level to 1800 meters. In Nepal, they do live in subtropical evergreen forests and have been observed around agricultural land. In Bangladesh, they've been seen in the eastern forested hills. In Myanmar, they've been found up the Burnaban Hills as well, so they seem to be pretty generalist in their habitat. So in terms of their ecology and behavior, the crab-eating mongoose, is usually active in the mornings or evenings and observed in groups up to about 4 individuals. They are suspected to be good. They are supposed to be good swimmers and hunt along the banks of streams and close to water, hence the name crab-eating mongoose. And despite their common name, they don't just eat crabs, but they also eat just about anything they can catch, just like most mongooses do. They can eat things such as fish, snails, frogs, rodents, birds, reptiles, and insects. So they're on that seafood diet. They'll seafood, they'll eat it. And they are listed as Appendix 3, so they are considered least concern. They are pretty common, which is good. Let me just turn that off. Yeah, we'll have a look at the cute little baby. Look at that cute little baby there. Really, really cute. But yeah, nice to see the crab-eating mongoose. Another cool species that Great Cakes mod has done a really great job of producing. So really, really awesome. So last but certainly not least, we're going back to prehistory. We're going to have a look at a really cool animal that is really a lot of people love. We have got Andrewsarchus mongoliensis. So a really, really cool species here. So his name means Andrewsarchus, or Andrew's ruler. These guys are an extinct genus of artiodactyl that lived during the Middle Eocene of what is now China. So the genus was first described by Henry Fairfield Osborn in 1924 with the type species A. mongoliensis based on only the large complete cranium. There was potentially a second species, Carnassium, described in 1977 by teeth, but we don't know. A mandible that was formerly described as Parastellodon does probably belong to Andrewsarchus as well. So it's really only known from a skull and teeth and maybe a mandible. So historically, and we'll go about through its taxonomy. So as I mentioned, it was found at the complete cranium. It was found in the Iridian Maham member in Inner Mongolia, and the discoverer was a local assistant, Kan Chenampao, who actually thought it was a skull of an entelodon. And a drawing of the skull was sent to the museum, and then it was found to be an extinct creodont in the family Myconidae, which was an early group of hooped carnivores. And if you guys seen Walking with Beasts, this is the kind of reconstruction that they used, but we'll get into what's changed there. In 1967, they found the mandible, which was thought to be from a skull that was the wrong pair, but likely from the same individual as the mandible. And it was found to be in another group. It was found to be similar to Chasonodon, which is another really weird kind of Mesosuchine, early hoofed carnivore. But in terms of its clarification, it was initially regarded as a Mesosuchine, so related to, as I mentioned, those hoofed carnivores. But then 1988, Donald Prothero and colleagues actually recovered it as a sister taxon to whales, and has become a more basal member of Cetacea which means it's more closely related to things like entelodonts, hippos, and whales. And in 2023, it actually pretty much confirmed this. There was a study that looked into ungulates, and it was found to be pretty much related to things like Proentelodon, Eolhias, and related to early members of Entelodon, and then the Entelodonts, and then Entelodontidae itself. So it is believed to be an early relative of those kind of animals, which is quite interesting. So it's pretty much definitely an Entelodon. And as we'll get into, that actually kind of infected a lot of what it how it's been reconstructed. So the fossils that lived to about the Middle Eocene and lived about 48 to 38 million years ago. This was before all those big modern carnivores like cats and dogs and bears. That was before they became prevalent in the ecosystem. So a lot of these hoot carnivores kind of took that role as the top predators. And Andrewsarchus was really thought to be one of those, and was actually believed to be one of the largest terrestrial carnivorous mammal. And basing it on what was thought to be a relative Mesionix, which is another species of early Mesionic kind of carnivore, or hoofed carnivore, it was estimated to be about 3.8 meters long, or about 12 feet long, and a body height of about 6'2", or about 1.89 meters. However, looking at its skull, they actually thought to have been more similar to those of entelodonts. As I mentioned, now Classistics agrees that is a type of relative entelodonts. That means those estimates are likely very much inaccurate. So the skull itself is quite big. Its skull had a total length of about 83 centimeters, or about 2.7 feet. Long skull, big teeth. They actually seem to have a fairly weak bite force, though, since their sagittal crest was reduced and their fossa was quite small, thought to have actually a lower bite force. And the cranium has like a very typical formula. It's got 3 incisors, 1 canine, 4 premolars, and 3 molars per side. And it seems the upper incisors were actually arranged in a semicircle in front of the canines, which is a feature which actually gives it away to being related to entelodonts, which is quite interesting. In terms of its diet, in his paper, he suggested it may have been omnivorous, and based on comparisons with entelodonts. And this conclusion is supported by Sachel and Gould, who those crowns suggested it would have been more herbivorous or omnivorous. And more things thought it was more closely in things like that. And even some suggested it would have been a scavenger as well, potentially preying upon brontotheres. But of course, as we mentioned, omnivores, they'll scavenge and eat meat and things like that. So very much pig-like, or even entelodonts have also been suggested as being omnivorous. So in terms of its paleoecology, this was a very interesting species. Back in the Eocene, it was very much a hothouse climate, so the world was much warmer than it was today. Model of the modern groups such as Perissodactyla, Artiodactyla, and primates first appeared during this time, but there was a lot of very interesting animals that kind of were in there as well. Omnivorous forms mostly switched to more folivorous diets and all went extinct during the Middle Eocene, and then a lot of these kind of this is kind of a big transition point where a lot of modern groups were evolving, but a lot of more archaic, like Paleogene type groups were going extinct. So the fauna, it was kind of founded and is quite interesting. There is lots of very interesting animals in there. There's the Hydenodontidae, Propelodon, the Mesionic, and other species of Mesionids that were found. The Artiodactyl Eolarius, which is a relative of actually this guy. Mesonyx was also found there, rodents and things like that. And then Ravids, Rhinotitan was a brontothere, other perissodactyls, a very interesting group of like large hyenodonts, rhinos. So really early groups and extinct groups. It's kind of a mix of modern groups and archaic groups of large animals that are ranging, from predators and things like that. A very alien ecosystem. The Ravid, as I mentioned, Eosmilus was there. Perissodactyls. Those was a lagomorph, so early rabbits.
the Cathodontidae were a group of like hippo-like ungulates that were actually related to whales and things like that. So a lot of really interesting groups of animals lived in this ecosystem and likely would have either been competing for food or potentially prey or, scavenging the carcasses. Andrewsarchus would have been, scavenging those carcasses. But yeah, really, really cool species. Definitely a big fan of this guy. And you can see the cute little babies there. Nice to see Andrewsarchus with the more newer, Entelodont-like reconstructions than instead of the old, walking with dinosaur style where it was just like a big hoofed wolf kind of thing. So yeah, this is definitely much more accurate, most likely, of how it would have looked in life. And believe it or not, this model is actually, the mod is actually based on the Tamworth pig. So very interesting, but definitely a big fan. So yeah, we'll pull out there. So we'll thank everyone for making these wonderful mods. And you have the cute little babies there. I don't know what's going on with that today, but anyway. So thank you, thank you Lorby, thank you Nuto, thank you Norwallow, thank you Leaf, thank you NicholasLionRider, and thank you Great Cakes Mod. You've all done a really great job with these mods. So yeah, I really, really, really hope you guys have enjoyed this video. Hope you guys like and subscribe. Always remember to hit the little bell icon to get notified below anything. So if you guys enjoyed this video, hope you guys like and subscribe, and bye bye.